It is that time again. I think I say that every time now, but here we are. Barcelona Dragons import tier list. I've been teasing on Twitter about this one. I'm not a massive fan of this one, so if you're a Barcelona fan, maybe sit this one out. But we're just going to jump straight into it. If you don't know the rules, I have a whole playlist that I'll link in the description so you can get your bearings and see where we're at. But Barcelona were the last teams, them and the Mercenaries. Kind of some confusion because some of them I've been told maybe aren't E's and some are, but then people have said that they are. So we're going to go with this and we'll make amendments if we need to in the future. First one we're going to talk about is Benjamin Ekbadawi, defensive tackle from Sweden. Played 11 games for the Barcelona Dragons last season, achieved half a sack, which is weird. I don't think that's exactly right because I've seen him have more than that, so I don't really know what the stats are with that one. But he is kind of a rotationary defensive tackle for the team, which is surprising. I thought that they would play him a little bit more. He flows well to the ball. I think that he is the most underrated run defensive tackle in the league. Like, he is excellent at just reading where they're going to go, feeling where the offensive linemen are at, and then attacking a run with a decent tackle. Release of the ball could be a little bit sharper. I think his hands aren't as active as they necessarily need to be effective in the pass. But for me, because of his rotationary role, I'm going to have him as a role player. Latordo Frencha, being at the Barcelona Dragons for 3 years since 2021, 22, and 23, played in 27 career games. It's probably one of the most well-known Barcelona Dragons. He's from Argentina, he's 27 years old, has achieved only one pick in the 27 games, and I think that's quite a big blemish on him, is that he's not necessarily a ball hawk of a safety. He does read the backfield well, he crashes onto the run, but he's not necessarily a coverage guy. Like, he'll stay deep and he'll come towards the run or he'll cover a tight end. But when it comes to him being matched up on receivers, he's not exactly what I would call an elite in that category. He also locks on with his eyes, like he will be ultra focused on a receiver. If it's man coverage or zone coverage, his head movement is not as active as I would like it to be. So I'm also going to have him as a role player. Steven Mcclusky next up. I was not going to lie, I'm kind of surprised that he got picked up. Like, he has only played one season with the Schwäbisch Hall Unicorns last year, played in 13 games. I've been told the GFL stats aren't exactly the best, but he achieved 168 yards and 2 touchdowns to tight end and a fullback. I think John Levy Cruz out in Hamburg, that's how they're going to use him, I think. So he is versatile, he is a good blocker. I think they're going to use him primarily as a blocking threat. Kind of a difficult one for me for Steven because he is a primary blocker, but there are, Kevin Mwamba I think is a better blocker than Steven. From what I've been told, though, with people within the Schwäbisch Hall Unicorns, they were planning to use him in a bigger role this year. He was just kind of starting off last season with the Unicorns, but they were planning to involve him more, from what I've been told within the organisation. His ability to come out wide as a receiver, he has played quarterback in high school, he played fullback and tight end for the Unicorns, so I think I'll probably put him as a role player again. Because of the versatility, I do think there are better blocking tight ends and blocking fullbacks. Leon Helms, you've got Patrick Polsch, who are very good blocking fullbacks. You've got Kevin Mwamba, who's probably the best blocking tight end in the league. So he just kind of falls as a player that's going to be used as a bit of a Swiss Army knife, I think, for this team. Manasseh Nari, another British interior defensive lineman. Now, this one's kind of confusing for me because he played for the Hurricanes last season and wasn't what I would call an elite defensive tackle. He is 6'2", has 309 pounds, so a big dude, strong hands, good motor. Like, he will chase down pretty much anyone. It's just, he doesn't have the most explosiveness. His pad level is pretty poor. I don't think he's an elite athlete. And with these two both in the same position, it seems like kind of an odd way to spend 2 E's is to have them both rotated. Because Benjamin rotated a lot last year. He isn't listed as starting any games. So to have two guys that are going to be in the same role with a pretty similar skill set of run-stopping defensive tackles is confusing. So I'm going to have him as a bench player because naturally he's not going to be starting. You could even put Benjamin in that role, but I do think that Benjamin's going to be playing a lot more this year. I'm surprised he didn't play as much in this season, but we'll see. But for me, I'm going to put Manasseh as a bench player. And tying up all the Brits, we'll go for Jai Jackson next. Jai, I think, is very underappreciated as a pass rusher and as a defensive end in general. Has only achieved 1 sack in 14 games that he's played in the league. He's also not really being used as effectively as I feel that he could have been in any of the systems that he's been at. In Cologne, they would have him line up against triple teams and just eat up blocks, which isn't necessarily what I would call a best use of his skill set. He has good lateral movement, his pad level solid, of course, was part of the IPP, so he does have athletic potential. What's kept him off the field, maybe his I know his get off isn't the best, like it's not elite level, but I'm just surprised that he hasn't been given the reins a little bit more. Like they really do use him ineffectively, I think. I watched some of the old tape, I watched some of the new tape, and I don't know, man. I feel like he gets a lot of pressures when he shouldn't necessarily get pressures because he's not exactly being put in the most advantageous position. He could be used as a more effective pass rusher. I think if you put him into 2-point stance, send him off the edge, and allow him to be a pass rusher, that's what he could be. But then they move him inside to like a 3-tech or sometimes even a 2-tech, and I'm like, okay, well that's different. I think that he could be a more effective pass rusher if they let him. Obviously, also they've stacked the D-line, which seems to be kind of a similar thing to what the Enthroners have done. We'll get to a little bit more of that in a minute. Given the depth of the position, I think that he will probably be like here. I'm hoping we see a lot more of his pass rush skill set used, because I really do like Jai. I do think that he's an underrated player. But people look at the production and like, well, and then you look into the tape and okay, he does show the flashes, but for some reason the coaches are just taking him out. Like when I was watching Hamburg, he barely fucking played, and I don't really know why. Maybe it was injuries, a couple like niggling injuries over the year that he had. For me, Jai falls under the radar of you need to watch him, not look at the stats. Stats don't tell the whole story, and I think Jai is a good example of that. Paul Jacob, offensive lineman from Germany, 6'5", 287 pounds as per the ELF website. Played for the Kings and went to the Surge. Now he's at the Barcelona Dragons. Young guy, only listed as technically one on the ELF pod. He's technically 1 year old if you look at the ELF website, but I believe he's 21. But he's a big guy. He's 300 pounds, 6'5", 21-year-old. So it's kind of hard to find that size. I think what they're going to do from people within the Dragons organization is that they're going to go with a long term with him, because he's only played like 2 career games as an offensive lineman. That's it. And one of them was against Kyle Kitchens. So in order for him to improve, I think that he has decent push on the run, but he will kind of dip his head. But he is young, he is big. He lacks the strength and explosiveness, and his balance on pulling isn't exactly where you need it to be a starting caliber tackle in this league. That being said, if they're going to be really buying into him for the future, then for me currently he's a bench player. There are so many talented German offensive tackles that are more experienced. I think that's keeping Paul Jacob at this kind of range. You've got people like Dominic Unscher, you've got Dominic Behrens, Fabian Kratz, who play a lot of offensive tackles, so it's hard to break into that role. I think that it is an extremely competitive position, but if they want to use him and buy into Paul Jacob in the future, then go for it. On to the Americans. Dominic Shelton is the next player we're going to talk about, son of the head coach, interestingly enough, and I think some people might look at that and go, well, he might not have earned it, but he absolutely has. Former Raiders Tyrell Corner, 4 interceptions in 2022 of the team. He's 25. He's a little bit smaller, only listed at 5'9", 194 pounds. He's not exactly a big dude. I think his ball skills are fine. I wouldn't call them elite level, but they're good. Aggressive on the ball, comes down well, is nasty with his hands. I think that he would be a starter level corner. Going to be used a lot this year because they're going to be, hopefully, if all goes to plan, the defensive line will be very active, so he could potentially get a lot of picks. That's what we're obviously hoping for with him, but I'm going to have him as a starter level player. Imon Dorsey, receiver out of Northwest Missouri State. Very, very fucking fast. Really can stretch the field. Great contact balance, good hands in contention. Good vision with the ball. I actually think he's a good receiver that is going under the radar again this year. There's a few Barcelona Dragons I think are going under the radar. He's certainly one of them. I see him as a starter level player, kind of similar to Willie Patterson. He's listed at 5'9", 185 pounds. Did do well in college, had a lot of touchdowns, 15 touchdowns in his 2 seasons there, and 1,188 yards. So has production at the next level. And I think coming into Europe, he will be a blazer. like Willie Patterson. Like, that's my comp for those two. So I think they're going to use him all over the field. They're going to be throwing it to him deep. He's going to take a lot of punt returns. I think he's a sleeper player for someone who could have a good productivity level. Another former Raider, Derek Brumfield, will go for him next before he goes to Levi Lewis. Raiders Tyrrell achieved 4.5 sacks at his time in the Raiders. Extremely explosive on first contact. Extremely strong hands. Nasty. Like, nasty defensive lineman, which we love to see. He is more of a ball guy. Like, he is more of like the power and roughness rather than the finesse and sharpness of a pass rusher. He's of course going to have a lot of help with Jai and Benjamin. It's going to be a very heavy defensive line front. That's clearly what they've gone for. The same thing as the Enthroners, which is interesting, as I mentioned before. But I think that he's a starter level defensive end. And he's only 26. He's 6'3", 231 pounds. A little bit leaner for a defensive lineman, but he's a nasty guy. Like, he can get to the quarterback. He can deliver big hits to run and pass, and I think that he can be effective for this team. Last one, Levi Lewis. Of course, a lot of people have hyped about Levi Lewis and consider him to be one of, if not the best quarterback in the year left this season. I am not under the same spell, I guess you could call it. I do really like Levi Lewis. I think he has a great arm. He has really nice touch on balls. He's obviously mobile, around a 4.72 in college, so he's fast. But some people are treating it like he's going to come in and throw 50 touchdowns. His career high is 26, and in his senior year, he got 20. He's safe with the ball, and he threw 4 interceptions in that last season. He is a safe quarterback. Hovers around 60% accuracy. He's not going to light the stat sheet on fire. He's just going to pick teams apart, I think. And he doesn't have what I would call an elite team around him from offensive line standpoint, or from a defensive standpoint. They're going to be allowing a lot of points. Imoni is going to be a big weapon for him, and of course he does have a couple of Spanish players that we'll talk about in future videos I think are going a little bit under the radar as well. But Levi Lewis is an all-star level player as he stands. Do I think he's going to get an all-star vote? No, because frankly the Barcelona Dragons, I don't think are a very good team, but he does have the talent. It's just hard for me to see him outperforming people like Jadrian or Riley or Chad when they have so much more homegrown and import talent around them. This was a hard video to make. I know some of these guys, so I didn't want to badmouth them, but for me it's not the most well-built roster, in my opinion. They could prove me wrong, but they've gone very Enthroners-like with a heavy D-line. They've got stud at quarterback. It's just, does he have the weapons? Barcelona lost a fucking lot of Spanish talent to the Madrid Bravos, and I don't think they can really get over that. You could argue they've locked into players that they wanted and they didn't take into consideration other options. I think there are better options at some of these positions they could have went for, but we shall see. I believe this is joint with the Enthroners, or maybe below the Enthroners. I'm not so sure, I can't remember. I have to look at ELFopedia on that one. Shout out to them for their outstanding work, but that's where we're going to cut it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is the penultimate episode, and then we'll have to start looking at other ways we can do tier lists. But thank you very much for watching. Support's been crazy. Go and watch my last video. Go and watch all my other tier lists. Thank you very much. See you later, and goodbye.